Hi, I'm Harry. I'm working with the team at SUPboarder. Currently I'm in the UK and we're in lockdown, so it means I can't go out in the water. So what I thought I'd do is a quick tutorial on how to improve your GoPro photos. If you're anything like me, when you're out paddleboarding, you take your GoPro, you're kind of more concentrating on your paddleboarding, so the photos that you get back from it aren't necessarily as good as they could be. But that doesn't mean they're a write-off. There's still a lot you can do. So what I'm going to do today is show you a photo that I've taken previously whilst out paddleboarding, and show you how you can really get the most out of your photos. Even if they don't look that great to start with, there's still a lot you can do. So what I'm using to edit my photos is Adobe Lightroom, but there's a lot of free software about, and a lot of the principles I say in this will be the same for whichever photo editing software you use. So yeah, let's jump on in and have a look at the process I use for editing these photos. So this is the picture that I'm going to edit. It's a photo of Ruben SUP surfing at his local spot. You can see it was a real nice day. This was actually taken in February last year, so it was pretty chilly. And there's a lot that can be improved in this photo. You know, looking at it like this, it's not really usable, but there's a lot we can do with it. So what I'm going to do is talk you through the steps. So this is what Adobe Lightroom looks like when you're in the develop pane, and on the right hand side is where all your different controls are. So all these parts here, so this is what I'm going to be changing to develop the picture, and a lot of these things, as I said before, will be the same across whichever software you are using. So the first thing I'm going to do is consider the composition of this photo. So the composition is about where the key aspects of the photo lie and how the photo looks on, how the structure of the photo looks on the screen. So I'm going to use this crop overlay tool here. I click on this, and that gives me the option to move the picture about within the frame. So I'm going to, first thing, make sure the horizon is straight. It's a bit tricky on a GoPro because it's so wide. You actually get a curved horizon, so I should probably say make sure the horizon is horizontal. And then I need to consider, where do I place the crop? Do I place it down here? Do I place it up here? So there's a couple of things to consider. The first one is there's a thing called a rule of thirds in composition. So it's where you try and align the main aspects of your image along these third marker points within the frame. So what I could do is put the wave and the horizon line on a third marker. So I've got the horizon line on the upper third and the wave on the left hand third line. This kind of works, but actually I think that with having Ruben in the center of the image works quite well, and then to keep that horizon line on the upper third as well. So I'm pretty happy with that as a composition. I quite like that. I think that kind of shows the image off nicely. I haven't cropped it down too much, so there's still a lot of usable. You know, this would be perfect for something like Instagram. I wouldn't use this on a print or a full-scale background for anything, but for Instagram this would be perfect. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is get rid of my hand and the paddle here. So I had the GoPro attached to the paddle, and during the session it moved around slightly so that the paddle ended up in the frame, which isn't ideal, but there are there is a way that I can get rid of this, I think it's quite distracting of the main image at the minute. So there's a thing called a spot removal tool, and that's this one here. And if I click on that, what that's used for is usually use it for if you've got a bit of dust on the lens, or there's just a small spot you want to get rid of. I'm going to really use it to its limits here by getting rid of my hand and the paddle. So that's quite a big task for it, but I'm going to break it down into I'll probably do it in 3 stages. So you just draw where you want to get rid of, and it selects a point that it thinks looks similar and replaces it with it. So I've done that first part there. I'll do the same again for the middle bit. and you can always move where it selects. So I'm going to move that to maybe over here actually. Oh, definitely not. See, that's way too bright, and it doesn't really work. So you've got to make sure that it is matched up to roughly the same exposure, etc., the same sort of texture and patterns that you were getting before. Oh no, I've completely lost it now. There we go. I think that's reasonable. This is really obvious for you as you're watching me do it, but if you were to come across this picture just on Instagram and you hadn't seen me go through this process, you probably wouldn't notice this section at all. Obviously, if you blew it up much bigger, then you might do. So I'm just doing the last third section there. I think that's okay. So that's the first step. So I've sorted the composition out. I'll just show you what it was like before. I'm just going to reset everything. And so you can see I've cropped it down, straightened the horizon, and I've got rid of my paddle in my hand because I think that was quite distracting from it. The next step is to make sure you get your levels and lighting right. So this picture is quite underexposed. It looks quite dark. It doesn't really stand out. So the first thing I'm going to do is increase the exposure. Okay, so just increasing the exposure to a level that I think is about right. I think I'm happy with that there. I'm going to push the contrast up slightly too. The highlights I think can go up a little bit, and the shadows can also go up as well. There we go, that's quite nice. I'm going to bring the blacks down, which just increases the contrast, and also bring the whites up slightly too. So now looking at this before and after doing the levels, you can see on the left it's really dark. You can't see too much of it, and then on the right I think it's about the right sort of exposure. It looks much brighter. Yeah, much happy with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is work on the colours and really try and make the colours kind of pop and stand out. So there's a number of ways you can do that, and a good way of understanding what colours you've already got in your picture are to increase the vibrance and saturation way up. I'm not saying you leave it like this, but this is to look at it. So what we've got here, we've got some really nice sort of tealy sort of colour on the sea and the sky. A number of colours, sort of the yellow and orange on the left hand side of the image, and then also the sort of oranges and greens on the cliff top there. So now I'm going to move down onto this colour tab here, and what I'm going to do is just try and line it up so that more of the colours, there's less of a range of colours, so that they're more complementary to each other. So I'm going to push the blues down, just make them a little bit more teal. It's not by much. I'm going to do the same with the greens. Well, actually no, that's the aqua. I think leave that one there. But the greens, I'm going to make them a little bit more sort of like a tealy kind of colour. And then the yellows, I'm going to make those a little bit more orange. This image is quite blue as it is in the shadow, so there's a thing called white balance, and that affects how sort of blue or cold or warm the image is. And then you've also got the tint within that as well, and you can set that at this point too. So generally most modern cameras are quite good at selecting the right white balance, but this is quite a tricky image actually, because everything in the shadows is a lot bluer and everything that's in the sun is really quite orange and quite warm. So you've got to get the balance right between the two. I don't think I'm going to do too much on the white. I'm not going to do anything on the white balance on this one. So now I'm going to bring the vibrance and saturation right back down to sort of more acceptable levels, and you can see now that looks really grey in comparison to having looked at them in those with them pushed all the way up. So I'm going to push the vibrance up a little bit. It's really grey. and the saturation up a little bit as well. Not too much. You can easily overdo it with these things though. See, now with those colours a bit higher, I do actually think that the image is a bit too cold. So I'm going to make it slightly warmer. Not by much. Just a little bit on the temperature here. And the tint I'm going to play around with as well. Yeah, see, that's too green. Okay, and it's always good to keep going, flicking back and forth between what you had originally and what it looks like now. One of the things you don't want to do is really change the image drastically from what it was before. It's really easy to tell when the colors have been manipulated way too much. So try and keep the image as true to the original as possible. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go onto the tone curve, and you don't want to overdo it on this, so I'm just adding a few points. And what I'm going to do is make just a subtle sort of like S curve. In some ways this is kind of similar to, I think that's too much, but I like the effect that it's going for. This will add a similar effect to that Lux effect that you get on Instagram. Okay, so I kind of like that. So I'll just show you what it was like before and after with the tone curve. So that was before the tone curve and after editing the tone curve. It just adds a little bit more gloss, a little bit more shine to the image. And yeah, I think that's all I'm going to do. So to summarize, the first thing to do is crop your images, make sure you get your composition right, take out anything that's kind of distracting from the image using a spot tool. The next stage is get your levels and exposure right, and then finally you can play a bit with the color and the tone curve just to really make the image pop and stand out, make it a little bit more glossy. So that's the image now, and I'll show you what it was like back when we started. So that's it now, and that's when we started. Hopefully that's been of use to you. If you did find it useful, and you've used it to edit some of your own pictures, then chuck a link in the comments below. I'd love to see what you've done, and I hope you're all staying safe. If you're in isolation, hopefully it won't be long until we're allowed back out on the water, and if you are already allowed out on the water, then you're very, very lucky. Make the most of it and stay safe. So for more technique tips and gear reviews, head to SUPboardermag.com, and hopefully see you on the water soon.